So changes. Got a little quote this Black History Month from a Black poet. It's time for us as a people to start making some changes. Let's change the way we eat. Let's change the way we live. And let's change the way we treat each other.
And who are you quoting?
Yes, that was our dearly departed rapper and icon, Tupac.
I thought it was Tupac.
It was definitely him, yes.
Yeah. So I want to ask you guys, because that's what I do. We've seen some changes, and one of them was announced on Sunday, and that was that Pierre Poilievre. I can't even say his name today.
Poilievre.
Pierre Poilievre is not only stating that he is going to run for the leadership of the Conservative Party, he is running to be the next Prime Minister. Did you guys see the intro that he did on Sunday there? The little 3 or 10 minute, I think he did 2 videos.
I saw one of them.
And I found it very interesting that he just immediately said that he is running to be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Michael Lee and I had a discussion about that, and he was wondering when that election would be, and basically told him that, first of all, this guy actually has to win the leadership of the party before he can actually run in whenever the next federal election is to be the Prime Minister. But I feel his goal is maybe attainable, and it's proper to go right for the big job, because ideally that's what he wants. Don't you guys agree or disagree?
It's what he wants. It's what the party wants. So he's sending a message to the party. Say, look, I'm going to win the Prime Minister. So
don't even step in this race.
Yeah, just stay out of my way.
Well, that's good. He's been in the House of Commons too recently, making a lot of statements more in favor of the anti-mandate and should we say anti-vax? No, that's just inappropriate these days.
He's anti-inflation is what he is.
That is true. He is one of those fiscal conservatives. That's what we're going to probably need when we come out of this pandemic and we realize that we all have lost a bunch of wages for the next several years.
Yes. Many of us have just gone backwards thanks to inflation.
Thanks, Trudeau.
I'm sure he thinks you're very welcome.
Thanks. I would like to throw to Michael Lee to pull up, as he is an excellent
puller upper.
Puller upper.
That one. That was not going to end well.
I want to pull up our dear man Pierre Poilievre in the House of Commons talking just I think yesterday, was it?
And the story that I'm hearing right now is that people feel like they're losing control of their lives. Whether it's the young couple living in their parents' basement even though they're 30 years old because they can't afford an $800,000 house and are calculating that they may never be able to own a home. Whether it's the immigrant who comes here as a doctor but is blocked by a bureaucracy from ever doing that job or getting a license to practice. Whether it's the First Nations community that wants to harvest its resources to lift itself out of poverty but is blocked by government gatekeepers. Mr. Speaker, or more recently, whether it is the countless small business people who've been flattened by endless lockdowns and rules that often seem to have no link to science, or whether it is the trucker who has been dutifully putting the goods and services in our communities on our shelves and on our kitchen tables, and now is called names and prevented from doing his or her job by a prime minister who's not interested in listening. But every person has their story. They have their reasons. They might be medical reasons, cultural reasons. They might even have had an unfortunate medical experience with prior medical prescriptions that have prevented them from making that decision. But that decision must be theirs. Their bodies belong to them. They are masters of their own decisions. And instead of listening to these people, the Prime Minister has insulted them and name-called them and left them with no choice but to engage in legitimate and peaceful protest. If he wants to put an end to those protests, if he wants to actually reunite the country, then he should do what others have begun doing, because freedom is on the march in this country. Saskatchewan, Alberta, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec are beginning to lift these restrictions. At midnight in Alberta, the vaccine passport came to an end, and people across the country are showing their support for starting freedom in this country, including two of the Prime Minister's own members of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, let's get these restrictions out of the way. Let's open up our economy. Let's bring back freedom. Let's make Canadians the authors of their own stories again.
As he thoroughly dodges the real question here.
Exactly.
Or if he thinks that what's going on outside is totally legitimate and should continue in its current form.
The honourable member for Carleton.
I don't want any of this to continue. In fact, the truckers themselves have said they will not stay here 1 minute longer than the Prime Minister continues to impose against the freedoms of Canadians. And as for him insulting the people who've spoken up, I encourage him to listen to his own member of Parliament, the member for Quebec, a Liberal MP, who said that when he went to the protest, he saw a very kind grandmother who demonstrated for her grandkids. She looked and sounded nothing like a white supremacist, nor did the Black, Sikh, and Indigenous Canadians I saw demonstrating on my way to Parliament Hill these last 2 weeks, or in Quebec City this last Saturday. I have enough respect for my fellow Canadians not to engage in these easy and absurd labels.
So, what do you think of our man Pierre Poilievre talking there about freedom and addressing the opposition to these mandates that we've seen in the last week, 2 weeks?
Well, I mean, that line about the $800,000 houses, that got me. Because, I'm not living in my parents' house or anything right now, but, where we are in our lives and trying to figure out what the next step is going to be, that is something that goes to my head. Like, how am I going to afford to, get into that next stage of my life or that next chapter? Like, am I going to be able to sustain it because of how everything is just literally going up? Like, gas went up by 10 cents a couple days ago, right? I used to fill my car up all the time, and now I'm usually doing half tanks because it's just way too much money now. Like, it's true. Like, what are we supposed to do?
It's an excellent point. That's why our man Pierre Poilievre has become quite popular. He's hitting on a message that most Canadians, and at least most millennial Canadians and Gen Zers, are realizing they're not set in their lives and in their bank accounts like the older generations are, and they're struggling. So with that being the case, this message is really resonating, as Michael Lee is saying. Adam, do you agree?
Yes, definitely. In the process of dealing with attempting to become a homeowner myself, and it's a very real problem. So it's quite stressful, and it is not great to see our Liberal government just basically passing it off like it's not important. Basically saying that if you're spending your time concerned about cost of living and inflation, that you're following a false narrative. Obviously, they're not in touch, and they don't care. And this is a real problem for me and many people that I know.
With that being the case, that he's hitting on a message right now that most younger generations are agreeing with. How do we feel about Prime Minister Trudeau and the message that he's been constantly dictating to us about simply getting vaccinated and don't worry about, this convoy out there that's demanding freedoms and actually just a bunch of racists that he's been saying? Do we feel that Justin Trudeau's leadership is actually going to be consistent and strong in the next up into the next election? Because as I see it, maybe in my biased newsfeed, but the countries like India and the US and others are pointing out blatant hypocrisy by this leader, and it's just astounding to see that here in Canadian media we're not seeing the exact same, the actual two sides of the story in regards to what's actually happening with his leadership. Do you guys feel that Justin Trudeau's leadership has been anywhere near decent? Because recent polls are suggesting that people highly disagree with the leadership that he's provided over the last little while, and especially in terms of this massive protest outside of Parliament Hill.
Well, you call it leadership. It's really a lack thereof. And I'm, at this point, I can't imagine what his long-term plan is as we come through the pandemic and the restrictions lift and all that. I mean, he's lost so many people. I don't know how he could possibly get people back. But it seems to me like he doesn't have a plan other than vaccine mandates. That seems to be it.
I watched a video just recently today. It was about 3 elections, I believe. Yeah, 3 elections. 2015, 2019, and last year in 2021. Are the 3 elections that the Liberal government has won. And in 2015, when he took hold of the government and beat the Harper government, he had 6.5 million Canadians vote for him. In the last election, it was just over, or not the 2019 election, it was just around 6 million people that voted for the Liberal government. And in the very last election, just recently, in the end of, was it the end of 2021 or beginning? I can't remember when that last election was.
I'm not sure all your dates are accurate there, but I'm sure everyone knows what you mean.
Yep, the last federal election we had, it was just about 5.5 million people that voted for the Liberal government. So that's not a good trend for this government, as he's losing about 500,000 votes each election.
How many would he get today, I wonder?
Well, I do not know, but this is why I'm saying the Pierre Poilievre, if he does get the leadership of the Conservative Party, may stand a decent chance of becoming our next Prime Minister, and especially if he resonates with Canadians as he seems to be doing right now.
I would say people should definitely pay attention to him. Pay attention to what he's saying, because he's talking about a lot of the issues that are real for most of us. And these issues don't seem to be discussed by our current Liberal government, as they spend their time dodging questions, refocusing on the negative, trying to divide people, and not discussing how they are going to solve any of the issues that are happening right now.
But do you guys think it's really going to make a difference? And I ask that as a very general, broad question. Every election that comes up, whether it's Conservatives, Liberals, I guess Green Party, whoever else is running, everyone seems to not want to go the Liberal way, but that seems to be the way we've been going for the last, how many elections now?
3.
So, yeah, we don't like how because isn't it due mostly to the fact that a certain province has more ridings than we do? Has more...
A certain 2 provinces and a very large Greater Toronto area.
Yeah,
one particular city.
Exactly. Like, a lot of the votes come from there. So you need to see a change there. Because we, on the outside, we're all voting... we're all not going to vote the same way we did before. Or whatever else. We're not going to vote Liberal or whatnot. But that entire province might still do the same thing. And then what? We're still stuck in the same spot.
It doesn't fall in that exact measure. That was the attempt of the Conservative Party last election to get that Greater Toronto area and get more votes. But if there's lots of theories that could come into play, and sometimes winning Quebec, if any party can get a greater amount of seats in Quebec, or at least have another party take more seats from another one, which tends to be the case when the Liberals lose, is the NDP may gain a more broader amount of votes across the country. But I mean, it could turn around and be like the Maritimes overly vote in one particular way, and more votes go towards the leading party that hopefully forms government. And then you have BC, who does have a lot of NDP vote that could sway in many different ways. So I mean, it's not necessarily that we're forced to have whatever government that the GTA decides we have, but that is a leading factor. Yeah,
that's what I've noticed.
And Quebec can be a tough one for the Conservatives, but sometimes they benefit when the NDP strength, or the NDP gains strength there.
Well, since we're on the same subject of leadership, just recently we heard two MPs, as Pierre Poilievre mentioned, that have gone astray from the consistent liberal talking points.
Have they been cancelled yet?
They will be as soon as the commander and dictator there decides what to do with them, kick them out of caucus or whatever. But
he's going to disappear them.
Joel Lightbound was the first man that disregarded the liberal message that we've been getting from the health minister and everyone. I'm going to do the same old ask of Michael Lee and pull up that video of Joel.
Pull it up.
They're confused when they see countries around the world like Ireland, Sweden, Norway, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, Israel, Denmark, Spain, and the UK, who have either dropped almost all restrictions or are fast moving in that direction. All countries, I note, with lower vaccination rates than us. Now, while folks are hearing and seeing all of this, they're left rightfully wondering, where the hell are we heading here in Canada? I think there lies the frustration. They feel there is no appetite from our government to adapt so as to reflect the changing data and the changing reality of the pandemic and of the world. They're worried that measures which ought to be exceptional and limited in time are being normalized with no end in sight, like vaccine passports, mandates, and requirements for travelers. Not to dismiss these legitimate concerns and not to demonize those who voice them. This is a policy that now goes against the World Health Organization's recommendation, and for which no epidemiological studies and projections have been provided. I think it's time to stop dividing Canadians, to stop pitting one part of the population against another. I can't help but notice with regret that both the tone and the policies of my government changed drastically on the eve and during the last election campaign.
So what does it say about our Liberal government that their people, their MPs, are coming out now and voicing these thoughts that are more in line with seemingly an increasing amount of people? What does that say? Like, you've jokingly, Josh, made comments about, the dictatorship of Trudeau, but I mean, this is a really bad look for them.
Yeah, this leader is an airhead. I mean, really, he's not producing any leadership, and like you were saying, there was a lack of leadership. This is a guy who immaturely ran away from a problem when it was occurring right outside Parliament Hill. He what did he do? He took the teenager route and basically said, "You know what? I'm gonna be sick with COVID and not come in," right? And then what was his second excuse after that? Oh, this is a bunch of racists and all that kind of stuff. Oh, there's security threats. I'm going to be locked away for a while until things calm down. You need a leader that actually is going to step up and talk with people when they're upset. What's occurring right now outside of Parliament Hill is supported by a good third of Canadians. If you take that into account, that if that turned around into one particular party, they could become, if it, this is spread out over multiple municipalities throughout Canada, but if you were just taking the actual movement itself, it's supported by probably more people than the actual Liberal government is in terms of reflection. So Yeah, this man here, Joel Lightbound, and then more recently, Yves Robillard, they both disagree with the terrible leadership that is being provided, and most Canadians, no, I don't know, actually,
Many Canadians.
no, some polls I've read recently are most Canadians are disagreeing with the leadership that's been displayed through the end of this pandemic from Justin Trudeau. So, with that being the case, you asked me, what does this say for these liberals to actually come out? This is a traditional liberal here speaking. This isn't this highly socialist authoritarian liberalism that Justin Trudeau is masquerading as what liberals are. This guy made 4 points here. The most recent one, the healthcare transfers, is something we've been discussing previously on this podcast, that we need the federal government to actually start putting more money in, as they've been taking it away for a while. And we have a healthcare system, we were saying, that is lacking under this the effects of this pandemic. The virus spread, the epidemiological spread of this virus has basically taken a natural curve, and lockdowns have been highly ineffective.
They've extended it.
Well, possibly, yes. I mean, most recently, we just had Pierre Poilievre there saying something to the effect that these lockdowns are not based in science. This Joel Lightbound is now somewhat agreeing. He's doing what I've been doing for the last several months now, is trying to find the data that should be provided. If you are going to destroy, let's not say destroy, well, it is, in some cases it is destroying, but if you are going to upend society entirely from what it has been the norm, you as a government need to be responsible to prove to Canadian citizens what exactly are the facts. And this Joel Lightbound is saying he can't find the facts. And I mean, I've been struggling to find facts. I've had to look at data from all around the world rather than just here in Canada, because other scientists around the world are providing much better data and evidence that's being published all over the place. Most recently, there actually is some science that came out on lockdowns. Did you guys hear about this?
I'm sure we're about to.
Yeah, the Johns Hopkins lockdown study. It's a little controversial, but the intent of this study, it's a metadata study that studying the effects of lockdowns on mortality specifically. So you always hear these people basically saying, get vaccinated, we'll stop the spread. That's what people were saying at one point. Then they were saying, it will stop mortality because you'll be less affected, right? That may be true, but that's vaccination. That's not lockdowns. Are lockdowns actually stopping mortality? This recent study of I'm going to pull it up here for myself. Where was it here?
I would imagine that they're just causing mortality to have different sources, different causes.
Yeah, the study itself, systematic search that identified 18,590 studies, then screened those studies based on the strength of how the study established a relationship between lockdowns and mortality. So this is specifically a research on the mortality effect. The effect on mortality was from lockdowns. And do you guys know how effective lockdowns are on the mortality rate?
No, that information is very difficult to find. But
according to this study,
yeah,
0.2% effect.
So I mean that's good to say, and I'm not surprised. But how did they come to this conclusion?
I guess. I mean, I didn't read every single one of these studies, so that's actually a fairly loaded question. But they're determining from each and every one of these studies, look at their case studies and projections and compare that. But I mean, what do I know? All I know is what these scientists and economists at Johns Hopkins say, because I don't really know.
No, it's John Hopkins, so it's likely a credible source. You make your own decisions.
Well, have these Freedom Convoy 2022 people had any effects on society here in Canada? Do you guys think so? Besides the nuisance that they've been to many, have they had any political effect?
Well, they've dominated the media and all political talk now for how long have they been out there?
Like what, 2-3 weeks now?
It's been about 2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks. So yeah, for sure they're going to have an impact on it. Now, exactly what that impact is, we're still probably going to be seeing that over the next few weeks. But
well, we discussed one of them just recently. That was Quebec. Quebec dropped that highly debatable tax that they were going to put on the unvaccinated.
Wasn't that before this, though?
No, that was just last week. The convoy was going strong.
All right.
Yep.
Social cohesion.
That's what Francois
There you go.
had stated.
Well, do you think that's why the provinces now are talking about dropping the vaccine passports?
What do you mean talking? Alberta had dropped that last night at midnight.
Saskatchewan's dropping it very soon, I believe.
Isn't Alberta talking about now as well, too?
Alberta did it already.
Oh, they already? Okay.
Yeah.
Did I miss that? I thought I missed
It
that.
was pretty sudden. They basically were like, we're dumping this tonight.
Yeah, I thought it was supposed
Done.
to be like... Yeah, all right.
Yeah, you make a good point, though. They had originally wanted to do it sometime in March. And then, after all this political uprising and protesting, what happened? Well, they said, you know what?
It's gone now.
It's gone now. Is this something well, I'm not even going to get into a second argument here, because I think we've mostly agreed that, you know what is the science behind segregating vaccinated people from being able to go out in society as much as the non-vaccinated, like
what is the science behind it? I don't know what the science is, but it's not a good idea. It's the division that Mr. Trudeau is creating. It's pitting us against our fellow citizens.
That's what that Joel Lightbound had said.
Yeah, it keeps us all distracted. Well, they continue, imposing nonsense restrictions and rules to maintain control.
Well, I'm going to ask Michael Lee to pull up a little fact that I looked up here recently in Manitoba. The COVID-19 cases shows us some specific data.
People who are not fully vaccinated are 1% more likely to test positive.
One time.
Is that what I said?
Likely.
1 time, sorry.
So that's what all this is about. They're 1 times more likely. What does that mean exactly, Josh?
Yeah, what is the math on that?
Unpack that for us.
Well, it means 1 times means it's the exact same number as vaccinated people.
Yes.
So you're what? People who are not fully vaccinated are 1 times more likely to test positive with COVID-19 here in Manitoba. So that means you're just as likely, vaccinated or not, to test positive with COVID-19.
Yeah, so we should dump these vaccine passports immediately. They are now meaningless.
That's kind of what that says, yeah.
By the government's own data here on the website.
It goes back to Joel Lightbound's comments there. He was saying that we need to look at the healthcare system rather than the divisiveness that you were saying and we were saying earlier about vaccine passports or worrying about whether somebody's vaccinated or not. Yes, we understand the fact that having a vaccination will likely make you a lot healthier and less likely to be hospitalized. We understand that fact.
but it's not going to make you any less likely to get infected as someone who doesn't.
It just helps you not to have as many symptoms.
Yeah,
Yes.
you won't get as sick and you'll get over it quicker.
Yes, and this is my point exactly. The divisiveness that we're talking about here, we're just looking at two specific groups. We're looking at vaccinated and unvaccinated, or some form of partial vaccinated. This is not good data in terms of overall health, because individual health matters. So when we're looking at the data, we're just looking at, yes, obviously we know that getting vaccinated will help, but as Pierre was saying and others have been saying for a while, there might be random chance that you may not have an ability to take it because of medical prescriptions that interfered with your heart conditions or whatever the necessary thing is, or you might have some kind of moral or religious exemption that you don't want to take a specific drug, whatever. Who cares? The point I'm making here is we're just looking at two types of data: vaccinated, partially and fully vaccinated, or unvaccinated. But that is in itself a very misleading point to look at, because that doesn't tell a person's overall health. You could have, in that unvaccinated determination alone, we do not know the natural infection rate of those people in that group. So let's just assume that you took the unvaccinated portion and split that into vaccinated or unvaccinated uninfected and vaccinated
leak spec.
Unvaccinated uninfected. Okay? Now that tells a different story, because we know from science over the years that having an actual immunological what's the word I'm looking for? Not immunological, but an immune response. Yes, basically to any virus. Well, not any virus, but most respiratory viruses like this, because obviously there are viruses that you just don't form an immunity to. But regardless, if you took the data and split it up like that, you would learn that infected people have somewhat of the exact same response to this virus that would put them up into the 2 or 3 dose category in terms of their likelihood at being hospitalized. So it's misleading data that we're looking at here. We're not looking at good disaggregated data that shows us specifically the risks that people that are unvaccinated actually do pose to society. So yeah, it's divisive. And it's intentionally divisive, I think.
Well, it has to be. I mean, these are the two groups that our PM is pitting against each other. And we can very clearly see here that there's no medical data to support this this division that's being created.
So Alberta's dropping the vaccine passport, or has. Saskatchewan is. Quebec, well, they're another story. They're finally going to more open society with lesser restrictions, where some people can come out into public, in greater amounts in restaurants and stuff that we've already done in many other provinces.
Yeah, you can take your dog for a walk now.
Yeah. So with that being said,
this data right here, this 1 times more likely, which is a silly way of saying the same chance. It's like the vaccine passports absolutely need to be gone now. We have to stop having rules and restrictions based off of them that are restricting a portion of our society from being able to just basically live their lives. And we can very clearly see, as I said previously, by the government's own data, that there's nothing backing that up. So why are we still perpetuating this?
Yes. And Joel Lightbound is asking that question. Pierre is also stating that there is a lack of science for this these restrictions. And with Alberta dropping it, Saskatchewan dropping it, who knows who's next going to be to drop these mandates? I mean,
I hope they're gone here soon.
That's what I'm asking now, as I like to ask all the time. How long do you think it will be before other provinces start to drop these? I think what's going to happen is actually we're just going to see the medical professionals come out and basically say, yeah, our modeling shows that the spread is going down and transmission is going down and it'll be safe to open, and it's not because of, you know, pressure on our political leaders. It's because the science is all of a sudden showing that, yes, it's safer now.
Yeah, and then the government swoops in to save us as usual.
But there is, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Please go ahead.
Did read something today though about some medical professionals were saying it would be too early to drop the mandates as well.
Did they?
Because Manitoba was not dropping them, but I think they're moving more from restrictions to recommendations. That's kind of their next step, I believe. After, I think we have new restrictions that came into effect yesterday, I believe, for like greater gatherings, more basically like for sporting events, outdoors, that kind of stuff like that. So a lot of these medical professionals, though, were also against completely moving everything, saying it's way too early to tell. So what does that tell you?
Well, I mean, did they say why? Because numbers have been dropping now for at least a week or so. I believe our case numbers have definitely peaked. So I would love to know why they think that it's too early at this point. And when do they think it will be time? Because it really seems like we have some people out there, even in the medical community, allegedly, that keep telling us it's not time, it's not time. But honestly, how long do they think that this can keep going?
Yeah, Jazz Atwell said earlier today, our hospitalization numbers probably peaked, I mentioned, about 15, 16 days ago, and our intensive care numbers probably peaked about 10 days ago.
So when is the right time?
So I understand the fear that they have because they've been going through a stressful situation in some healthcare facilities. But with that being said, these leaders are still looking at things and slowly cutting back on restrictions. The question we're really asking here is, firstly, how effective are these restrictions? How effective is it, Michael Lee, that you can now have like 10 people go to a restaurant together rather than like the smaller amount or whatever it was previously? You think that really affects it? As this Lightbound guy was saying, show us the evidence of why these restrictions are needed.
Not only that, but a lot of the restrictions that they opened up were also had to do with household limits and everything else. But who's to say that people weren't doing that before already as it is?
Well, they were.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the only thing you're doing now is allowing it more in public. You're allowing more gatherings outside. You're allowing more people to go into restaurants together, this, that, and the other. But to bring up the whole household thing, always why I'm mentioning that is because, again, you cannot police everybody. People have been doing it as it is.
Right, and I believe there was substantial evidence that a lot of the transmission was happening within households. So if they're loosening those restrictions at this point, then, you know, what is the point of any of the other ones if that's where most of the transmission was?
Yes.
All other restrictions should probably be dropped.
Exactly.
Yeah, we need to look forward, as this guy was saying. We need to look forward towards healthcare being stronger. We need to provide better healthcare so that we have more beds. We're living on too limited of a healthcare system. You know, we're lucky because depending on how you look at the data, people that have been vaccinated to some extent is extremely large. I think in the entire world, Canada is like in like the top 5 or something, as opposed to, especially for countries that are free, because there were countries that like specifically mandated it for all citizens, so obviously they have very high rates there.
I wonder how that went.
Yeah, it was
Not well.
It's doing just about as poorly in terms of protesting as most places around the world, because you think this protest is something unique to Canada. It's unique in the way that somebody finally stood up, but it's happening across the world now. But the point I'm making here is we're luckily vaccinated to a high extent. It's now turning from the question of blaming people for not being vaccinated. That is what our current Prime Minister has been doing. You know what? Go ahead, Michael Lee. I'm going to ask you to pull up a video. One more before we get to the end of this show.
While he's pulling that up, I just want to point out that I was reading today. Apparently, in other protests around the world against similar restrictions now, people are starting to fly Canadian flags as a result of this trucker convoy, or Convoy 2022.
A year ago, the Prime Minister rejected vaccine mandates, calling them extreme measures that could have real divisive impacts on our community and country. Since then, no one has created more division than the Prime Minister, pitting Canadian against Canadian and using vaccine status as a dangerous political weapon. In the words of a senior Liberal today, now that we have one of the most vaccinated populations in the world, we've never been so divided. When will the Prime Minister stop dividing Canadians and end his punitive vaccine mandates? So using mandates to discriminate against Canadians based on their vaccine status is absolutely punitive and discriminatory. A senior Liberal called on the Prime Minister to stop dividing Canadians on the issue of vaccine status. When will the Prime Minister start listening to the science, start listening to public health officials, start listening to his own members of Parliament, and end his campaign of discrimination and division against Canadians?
Very passionate.
Yeah, so that sums up my point exactly. It is divisive, and he specifically turned into being divisive during that election, that latest election. So we have a highly vaccinated population, right? It's a good thing, but we don't need to be turning vaccinated and unvaccinated, whatever, against each other. That's not the question anymore. The question is, what kind of healthcare system can we actually provide Canadians? That's what we need to be looking forward to. That's what that Joel Lightbound was saying. And it's just astounding that we have this Liberal health minister here saying old science here. That, what did he say in this argument here? That when he gets vaccinated, not only is he protected, but he's protecting his family. Is that what we've determined to be the actual truth?
No, not anymore. Not with the current variant and the transmissibility of it.
I think that was the original view, but
At one time that may have been the case, but
it was the view, but
now.
it was never actual case. If you actually read the Pfizer data on the vaccine initially, it was so that you would have lesser symptoms. That's always been the case with the vaccine. So the point of the matter here is, why are we worrying about pitting the population against each other when we really need to be looking towards the bigger question of developing a better healthcare system, and stop with these lies that you're going to be helping somebody and saving somebody by you yourself getting vaccinated? The only thing you're helping is maybe if you're an older person and you do decide to get vaccinated, you're likely to not get hospitalized, right? If you're 30 or something years old and in perfect health, or decent health, even not perfect health, you're going to be okay. Why start pitting the society against each other? We don't need division anymore. We need to look forward to a better outcome, a better healthcare system where people can start to drop these stupid mandates and move towards a society where we can actually look towards freedom for individuals, for their own health choices that they're making, and for the economic outcome that is about to occur and is occurring as we see inflation rise to like 5% or something, and Canadians are starting to worry about where exactly their finances are going to be in the next little while and how that's going to affect them. You know, we need to look towards the actual problems here that are being pointed out, not the dumb divisiveness of this current Prime Minister.
Well, thank you for coming to Josh's TED Talk. This has been Leak Spec, and we want to hear your thoughts. Comment down below. And just remember that it's not us versus them. We're all in this together.
sure are.